Long ago, in a beautiful farming and fishing village situated in a dense forest, lived the great people of Achenkokro. They were farmers and fishermen. They lived simple lives and were happy people. But there was calamity looming over the village. It was like a carpet slowly creeping over the entire village. Things are not the same anymore, says one villager to another. The other responds. 3 days ago, the third wife of Chief Ejinim, their leader, bore him a son. The village was filled with celebration. Finally, a son had been born. But the chief's house was quiet. Chief Ejinim was troubled. His wife and baby were sick. This was the third son born to him by his third wife. And this time, somehow, the villagers already knew about it. The other two died after birth without much noise. News of men and women continuously growing weak were at his doorstep every passing day. Crops would not grow anymore, and the river no longer gave up its fruits. An intervention was needed. The neighboring villages refused to form an alliance with Chief Ejinim due to ancient tales. Thus, he had to take a decision, or his son dies. His people perish. He needed the emerald stuff at this point. Maybe its mystic powers could resolve the current situation they faced. The emerald stuff is an ancient mystic piece which is believed to possess the ability to heal, strengthen, beautify, induce abundance, and good fortune. About 105 years ago, during the Great Intertribal War, it went missing. Chief Ejinim summoned his people, and after several deliberations, a warrior was chosen to seek and bring the stuff home. He was sent off with all he would need for the journey: water, nuts, cola, and ancient scrolls. This great warrior begins his journey, passing through neighboring villages and launching into the unknown territories. After hours of journeying, he lays on a rock in the forest and falls asleep. In a dream, he sees a staff with a precious stone shining so bright that his view is obstructed. He wakes abruptly to the sound of little children playing with water along the banks of a river. He thought to ask for direction from them, but then he realized there was no river by this side of the forest. These happenings startled him. Picking his sack, he quickly reached for the ancient scrolls and sought directions. The signs pointed west, where the sun was beginning to set. He set off on his quest to find the emerald stuff. After a day's journey, NICCO came across a great kingdom with massive walls and a huge gate. Per the symbols on the gate and pillars, this was the hidden home of what he sought. He stood far off, observing the kingdom and the gates. Traders with their trucks of loads were the only ones who entered and exited this beautiful kingdom. A particular truck, not far off where he stood a few meters away from the gate, seemed to have issues. Some of the load fell by the road and the servants had to quickly pick it and put it back. Their master ordered them to stop. They pack and begin securing their load. One of the servants seemed particularly clumsy and nervous. Shabby look, torn clothes, but with a set of fresh clothes hanging on his shoulder. It appeared to be their uniform, as the other servants wore same. In one of his frantic moves handling the load, he drops the clothes. After a few minutes, he realizes and begins to search for it. NICCO draws closer, taking advantage of the distraction, and sneaked into the truck. Their master urges him to hop on the truck, so they depart as everyone else was already on board. They had already wasted enough time. The sun was beginning to set. It was a 3-hour journey from the gate to the market square. NICCO thought of what to do once the truck finally parks. His thoughts were briskly interrupted as the sack of rice behind which he hid was pulled. He quickly grabbed the next bag and threw it towards the servants nearby. "Hey, why did you?" "Throw to the next person," NICCO retorted. The servant in question does, and within minutes, the truck was empty. They cheered him on for his innovative idea, which made their work easier. They usually would have carried it on their heads from the truck to their master's warehouse. Amidst taps on the back and hearty conversations, the other servant came around. And this time, NICCO was wearing his new uniform. He smacks NICCO in the face, pushes him to the floor, and the two men begin to wrestle. Their master walks in as the servants try to separate them. He inquires what had led to the fight, and the servants tell him the two new servants had a disagreement. The other servant was the first to hit NICCO, and because he had helped them greatly, they were on NICCO's side. The master fired the other servant immediately. He was against the idea of working with a freed prisoner in the first place, but he was short on staff, so he accepted. Thus, he didn't even take into account the faces nor the number of the new servants. NICCO had replaced the new servant. He had a job now and could stay at the servants' quarters provided by his master. He was elated. He could blend in easily, but the newly acquitted prisoner was not happy. He had been robbed of his livelihood. How was he going to survive? His prison master had promised him this job months prior to his release. NICCO had found himself an enemy. NICCO continued with his job as a trader's servant, helping to load, offload, and sell grains like rice, wheat, beans, lentil, coffee, and so many more at the market square. He gathered information during the day while he interacted with people at the market square and neighbors around his abode. His pursuit of the stuff took place mainly at night. He would stroll the streets from the market square to the neighborhoods, decently dressed and his head covered with a scarf most of the time. One day, after work on his usual investigative strolls, he spotted a lady from afar. She stumbled and fell. He quickly went to her aid and helped her to stand up. He offered to assist her with her load. She was skeptical and politely refused, saying, "Thanks for your help," and dashed off. The market square stood still as these two interacted. No one spoke a word about it then and ever after. She hardly ever interacted with anyone. NICCO met her twice after their encounter and could easily make her out, as she was the only young lady who wore a black dress and black veil. All the other ladies wore colorful clothes with beautifully adorned hairstyles and mostly a scarf, never a veil, talk less of a black veil. She had piqued NICCO's interest, so he decided the next time he saw her, he was going to have a chat with her. One cool and cold evening, while most vendors were retiring to their homes after the day's work, NICCO bid his colleagues farewell and promised to see them later in the evening as he proceeded to the other side of the market. From a distance, he could see her approaching, so he stood under a tree by the rough path proceeding from the palace on which she walked. "Lovely evening, right?" he said. As NICCO approached her, he saw her full face for the first time. She was of an unmatched ethereal beauty. She smiled and tried walking away, but NICCO caught up with her. He smiled and told her his name, to which she nodded. NICCO took pleasure in telling her stories about his day, people he encountered, plants, herbs, even the weather, what it was like in neighboring villages where he and his master sourced and sold goods, and so much more, all the while still remaining a little mysterious, as was she. He could not address her by her name, only by Missy, she insisted. Soon, they were sharing heartfelt goodbyes and glistering eye hellos. Their evening stroll after the day's work had become a norm. They looked forward to seeing each other. The people in the kingdom did not know of their evening strolls, or so they thought. 2 weeks after their initial conversation, NICCO waited at their spot, but she did not show up. He had arrived at their usual place of conversion a little before sunset, and now it was dark and the moon lit the sky brightly. It was time to retire to bed. His colleagues might be looking for him. He never returned back home from his evening strolls this late. He started walking towards the market square, and suddenly he turned around and sprinted in the direction of the king's servants' quarters, ran past the first 2 blocks into the bush nearby. He recalls her pointing to a hut as her place of abode. She, however, cautioned him not to come there as she lived with her grandmother. As he approached the black hut, NICCO could hear groanings like that of a human and a lion at the same time. Then he heard her melodious, tiny voice whisper a song. Then he knew for sure it was his Missy. He enters the hut shouting, "Liz!" She hushed him. She sobbed. She could barely move. There was blood all over her bedding and on the floor. NICCO rushed back into the bushes. "Oh, he could not stay with me. Whoever," she muttered. About 300 meters from her hut, NICCO looked for leaves, herbal leaves. About a few minutes of searching, he came back rushing into her hut. He made a herbal paste with the leaves and some water, grinding it on a large stone with a smaller stone. He gently applied it on her arm and covered it with a piece of cloth. Hesitating at first, he finally voiced it out. "Missy, who did this to you?" NICCO spent 3 days in her hut and heart caring for her. His swiftness to care for her sealed what she had burdened in her heart for him. She finally disclosed what she actually did for a living, her royal mandate. She was not a pet keeper like she initially shared. Her grandmother was returning from her trip, so NICCO had to leave and could not visit her in her hut anymore. Duty calls. She was all healed and strong now. She had to return to her duty post. NICCO had already returned to his duties and was eagerly anticipating their meetups. They had agreed to meet 4 days after NICCO had left her hut. Days went by and this duo had not seen each other. She was not at the usual spot. He could not go to her hut either. The market square grew quiet for some strange reason. There were fewer people outdoors than usual. It was a Monday, a major market day, the first day of the week. NICCO, after waiting for her for 5 consecutive days, decided to wait for one last time before approaching her hut once again. He could see her walking towards him, briskly, with her veil down. That was bizarre. He whistled to get her attention, pulled her to the side as she drew near. She seemed disheveled and frightened. She stuttered. "They attacked me again. The lions." "How?" NICCO asked. Perceiving a stench and whispers, he signs for her to keep quiet. The guards were pursuing her. They had to run. The guards were getting closer. NICCO thought to go west towards her hut. Pulling him by the hand, she moved in the opposite direction towards the market square, eastward. They made it past the square's palm wine spot at Asane's place. NICCO had thought of bringing her here to drink some palm wine, but she does not eat in public. They went past the butcher's shop next to it in full sprint and were making their way towards the rooms behind the sub-chief's sitting area on the Deba grounds, where she imagined would be a safe place. But then she saw reflections of glistering green eyes in the pots of water nearby, used in cleansing hands and feet during Debas, and heard grunts of the guards close by, as though they were closing in on them. Thoughts racing through her mind, she contemplated her next move. She had to escape. They had to. Well, at least one of us has to be alive to see the next market day, she thought. Access the secret room via the Deba grounds sacred passage to the chief's outer courts, he thought. Oh, NICCO sure had done his findings. It was a quiet night after all, and since the guards were after her, or him, them, NICCO, think straight, he exclaimed, but straight was the only word enunciated. As she stood without an alternative, she heeded his call and ran straight ahead. They went past the firewood shop, past the vegetable stands at the market square and some houses, then passed by their usual spots, upwards towards the palace. They used the rough path beside the palace, leading to a secluded settlement. It was all dark from here. Groping in the dark, she led NICCO into the dark room. The lions are not here. He, turning and observing his new environment, asked, "What do you mean?" Before she could respond, the writings on the wall had caught his attention. NICCO ran his hands on the walls. They were full of ancient writings and tales dating to 3 decades. "We need to move or fight," she said as she tries to secure the entrance. He was the only one who was able to stand the stench she carried from spending all day with the lions and cure her wounds from the attack by the lions that fast. So he could help her, right? "What do we do?" she asked as NICCO kept running his hands over the writings on the wall. He whispered the writings under his breath and was eager to know how the story ends. It recounted tales of the emerald stuff and of 3 generations. The last statement he read, the one directly opposite the room's entrance, was missing some characters as the statement was not complete. It read, "On the eve of the appointed day, the chosen, accompanied by the Emerald Guardian, will behold the stuff and shall assess the treason?" NICCO exclaimed. "Which is it?" "What are you doing?" she asked. NICCO passed his hands on the last statement again, pausing to reflect and find a link with what he had learned from the ancient scrolls. He laid his left hand on the wall, reading it again for the 3rd time, finger tracking the characters, this time around out loud. While approaching the last piece of the writing, he realized the scar he had on his hand was not a scar at all, as he had believed. He was told he got it from being attacked by a fox as an infant. It completed the last character of the statement and read, "Shall assess the treasured stone." Under the statement, the side of the wall he leaned on reclined and the room shone brightly. There in the middle of the dark room stood the great emerald staff. Who is he? She thought. But all that did not matter now. With her eyes shining brighter, she summoned courage and drew closer. "What's my name?" she asked. "Mention my name." "Woman, now is not the time," he said. Hearing the guards and the lions approaching, she screamed, "Mention my name while you hold this," pointing to the staff, "and think of a place where you'll be safe." He hesitated, but with the lions nearby, he shouted her name. She, holding firmly onto his arm. The stuff shone so bright that the entire kingdom was illuminated, waking the people like it was morning. Guards quickly swung the door to the dark room ajar, but the door was nowhere to be found, and so the lions were led in to the room. It was bright outside, and the people need not to see the lions. The guards swiftly retreated as the 3 lions got into the dark room, leaving a new and younger guard behind. Without the guardian in close proximity, the lions devoured anyone and anything in the dark room. Loud screams were heard from the room, and then silence, followed by darkness. It was night once again. Traders and settlers went about their daily activities. The day after the biggest market day was usually still busy and demanding for traders. Lots of work to be done. Take stock, pack, load trucks destined for nearby villages and settlements. Guards and messengers moved clandestinely around the different neighborhoods and the market square for information on her and anyone absent in the kingdom. The palace messengers interacted with the traders, while the guards queried the palace intel. As one of the messengers got to NICCO's master's shop, there was only one servant there. Alarmed, he inquired to see if he could find any information, and he found out that the master, with some of the other servants, had gone to the neighboring settlements and villages to trade and source new merchandise for the people of their kingdom. The rest stayed behind, cleaning and prepping the storehouse, pending their arrival. This was not unusual, as the market trade masters often took several trips in a month. It was on such a day, 40 nights ago, NICCO made his way into the Mazik kingdom. The smell of blood began to fill the atmosphere, from the guard who died and some livestock, and bleeding sick individuals in the kingdom, particularly from the palace. Older people who knew to read the signs hid their children after they came back from school. They themselves closed early from work and got indoors before sunset. Only the younger generation and the ignorant of the kingdom's tales stayed around till dusk. 3 days had gone by without any progress on finding her. Things seemed pretty normal in the palace and the kingdom, except the smell of blood and the sick young king who hid in his chambers. His health was fast declining, and help was to be sought from far and wide. The guards searched smaller settlements and neighboring villages. No one had information that could help solve the puzzle. The young king's mother did all she could to nurse him back to health, while the guards kept on with the search. They would have consulted the deity, but her absence made it impossible. The clock was ticking. Back in Ajinkwa, there was even bigger trouble than that in Mazik kingdom. They lived and moved in darkness as the moon hung visibly in the sky, morning, noon, and night. Chilly winds filled the atmosphere morning and night. Destiny had been fulfilled. He had touched the stuff, and nature responded. Destiny had been fulfilled. He had touched the stuff, and nature responded. Nature spoke, and it was loud. Well, in this instance, it was bright. Ejapasko is special. Ejapasko is from the Almighty. Ejapasko is royalty, the villagers whispered amongst themselves. Ejapasko's farm shone bright. This piece of farming land stayed illuminated day and night amidst the total darkness. He crept out in the middle of the night as she laid sleeping on the mat on the floor. He walked quickly past Ejanimon's farm straight to Ejapasko's farm, taking the emerald staff with him. It was at the core of all his visions. As he approached the farm, he saw the popular illuminated tree. It seemed to be all the people in the village talked about lately. Then the emerald staff began to sparkle, this time around gradually as he drew nigh to the tree. He stood before the mango tree, staring at it intensely, as if it was going to utter a word at any given time. After a moment of silence, he turned and looked around. He noticed the tree had its shadow cast to the left. An image of the symbol on his hand appeared on the ground where the shadow was cast. He knew instantaneously to dig that exact spot. Great, he had carried along his farming tools, hoping to use it as an excuse should he encounter anyone on the way to the farm. He began digging. He dug and dug and dug and dug till he could no more. Settling on the ground close to the tree with his back against the back of the tree, the night felt still. Cool breeze and chirps from birds occasionally filled the atmosphere. He gave a deep sigh and dozed off. He laid sleeping on his farm. Then he had a dream. NICCO in a vision saw 3 large mangoes, ripe at different stages, with the largest being the most ripe. These fruits were picked, eaten, and the seeds planted by settlers. The seeds planted became fruit-bearing trees of its own. Fruits from one of the secondary trees was being displayed on a fruit stand in Mazik Kingdom. Fruits from another fell from the basket in which it was arranged as it was being carried in a busy market square in Mazik Kingdom and was kicked and tossed by bystanders. Fruits from another fell and one rolled on the ground, stopping right beside NICCO's feet. Why is he still sleeping? She asked as she picked a stone and threw it at NICCO. How did she get here? She has never been on this farm. They had been feeding on fruits and vegetables from the garden around his hut. She got down on her knees to sit beside him for a few minutes of rest. Her eyes shone bright like the tree, and so did the staff. This night, these 3 were not the only source of illumination. The dark hole was lit too. He peeped into the hole and it was way deeper than he had originally left it. The lady had continued digging in an attempt to assist this man who saved her life. He draws the staff closer to him as he peeps into the hole, and suddenly, like a magnet, the emerald staff pulls a bright object mid-air, right above the hole. It was a replica of the emerald on the staff he now possessed and wielded. She wondered, is this what Iman had always talked about? The 2 halves of the emerald all in one place. By her name, the emerald is activated. By her name, the 2 halves will be unified. By her name, the emerald is activated. By her name, the 2 halves will be unified. Could this be it? There was still a rule to the mention of her name by the one who wields the emerald staff. On the 3rd count of her name being mentioned, her life will come to an end. He continued surveying the parameters of the hole. He tried attracting the object with the staff he had in his hands. He tries a couple of times from different angles. He gets closer and closer and suddenly slips and falls. He is falling head deep into the hole. Then she screams, "Scream my name!" Her voice echoed pain and fear as she slumps on the ground. By this time, he had learned not to question her in moments like these. "Lucina!" he shouted. He heard her slam on the ground as he mentioned her name, and in that instant, all he could think of was wrapping his arms around her, being beside her. The halves collide and form a single big and bright emerald stone, and shone so bright as NICCO landed on the soft, dewy weeds on the ground and her supple skin. She laid lifeless on the ground. He carried her to his hut as he refused to leave her by herself on the farm. "Are you okay?" he muttered as he carried her through the darkness back into his hut. The sun rose and the cocks crowed. It was refreshingly beautiful. A new dawn awaits the people of Ajinkwa. The sun had finally risen after 7 days of darkness in the moon's light. Upon continuous search and with intel from the servants of NICCO's former master, NICCO's nemesis, the guards were able to track NICCO and the guardian. NICCO had forgotten to get rid of his old clothes properly, leaving the slave a chance to trace his original settlement after finding it along the path that leads to the kingdom when he went out searching for his lost uniform with hopes that it had indeed fallen to the ground. It bore symbols peculiar to people of NICCO's settlement. It was a 2.5 days journey to Ajinkwa on horseback. After searching the entire village with the help of a hunter who lived in a neighboring village, they found NICCO's hut. They wanted to creep up on him, but he heard the noise of the multiple footsteps and ruffling of clothes, so he came out, holding the full emerald stuff. The guards, once they saw the stuff, fell to their knees, face down, and hailed NICCO, my lord," as they would a king. Their voices echoed. It was then she stepped out. The guards, drawing their swords, chanted, "Traitor!" NICCO stretched his arm and pulled her behind him, shouting, "She's mine, she's my wife." The noise drew the attention of people in the village and that of Chief Ejenim as well. He was quickly recognized by one of the guards, who was much older and knew the palace history. "Surprised to see you here, Chief Ejenim. How could you have hidden the chosen and the lady here? I thought you were on the late king and the young king's side." "You never liked Pasco. Why help the chosen?" the guard inquired. Chief Ejenim was the least concerned about the questions directed at him by the guard, but instead was surprised to see the emerald stuff in NICCO's hand. "Has the emerald stuff revealed his secrets to NICCO?" "All of it," NICCO responded as he perceived what Chief Ejenim had running through his mind. I am sorry," Chief Ejenim started. "The young king is sick and we came seeking help. We would need the lady to come back to Mazik Kingdom. She can be of help," said one of the guards. I see. Well, she is my wife, so where she goes, I go. I am coming with you to Mazik Kingdom," NICCO said. The guards proceed to lead the way. NICCO helps his lady to get on the horse and asks that Chief Ejenim be brought along too. They proceeded and embarked on a 3-day journey back home. They went straight to the palace upon their arrival to the kingdom. Unfortunately, the young king gave off his last breath the moment they went past the great gate of the Mazik Kingdom with the emerald stuff and the chosen. The king's mother was saddened at this news, and even more when she sighted Chief Ejenim and the chosen with the stuff. He had failed at keeping the chosen away from this kingdom, and now his son is no more among the living, but the dead. Chief Ejenim had been taxed by the young king's father to keep NICCO and his father away from the kingdom and the throne. He feigned friendship with Pasco right from the Mazik Kingdom, and even followed him when he moved to a neighboring settlement to escape pursuit and eventual death by the hand of his brother. They both lived far away from home for a really long time. He desired to hold an important role in the Mazik Kingdom, which will have a transgenerational impact on his children. So he pretended to be Pasco's friend to gain favor from his brother. Until date, none of the children born to him had lived past 2 months. The guards were asked by the king's mother to bind him and put him in prison for judgment. With the young king dead and the chosen who wields the staff in the land. NICCO had to be crowned king. A coronation ceremony was held and he was crowned the supreme king of the Mazi land. The entire kingdom jubilated at the return of the rightful and true king according to the royal lineage from the 3 royal sects. Eja Pasco was meant to be king but didn't live to see it come to life. Today, his son sits on the throne and reigns as the rightful heir. A beautiful royal marriage ceremony for King NICCO and Queen Lisina followed. Queen Lisina had been released from her duties of tending to the lions and the yoke of living without love and a family. She was now free to be her best self in the capacity of her new role as a queen of Mazi land. The return of the rightful king made the smaller settlements, villages, and the entire kingdom unite, and the construction of a great wall surrounding the Mazi land commenced.